Welcome to the Retrieving Catholicity podcast, where we think about life and ministry in light of the whole truth with the whole church for the whole world.
Welcome into another episode of the Retrieving Catholicity podcast, and I can't believe I'm doing this. This feels like the worst decision I've made in a long time. But today's guest is my sister, Molly Ballard. Molly.
Greetings.
Welcome to the podcast. It's really tragic that my 5 other guests signed up for today couldn't make it, but...
Or not tragic at all.
Yeah. Well, in all seriousness, my sister is actually somebody who I think would be a helpful voice to have on the podcast, and I will be a little bit sarcastic and jokey at the beginning, and then maybe interspersed a few moments of sibling humor, but we will be quite serious and have a fun discussion nonetheless, even though I do think that, a little bit of humor is expected. How you doing, Molly?
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. I didn't know you had a podcast. I'm just kidding. But thanks for having me on. This is going to be great.
Yeah, you're welcome. We don't talk a whole lot, but we also talk every day. It's a weird phenomenon.
Yeah. We talk a lot, say nothing at all.
Well, what happens is Rosalie, my oldest, always wants to call Aunt Molly, and then she'll tell her about things, and she'll start telling jokes. And right now, Rosalie's jokes are just 2 random ideas back to back. So she'll say why did the frog cross the road? And you'll say, why? And she'll say, because the princess picked it up, and then just kind of deadpan look at you, and you'll start laughing, and she'll grin
right on cue.
Hilarious.
And you better laugh.
Yeah, you better laugh. Well, Molly, where are you right now? What are you doing with your life? What's your job? Let's talk about that a little bit. We'll get it biographical, and that'll lead us into a topic that I think will be helpful for our podcast about the church's role in mercy ministry, how our ecclesiology shapes our engagement with the world, and things like that. So tell us a little bit about where you're working and what you're doing, and that'll get us into our conversation.
Yeah, sure. So I work for Send Relief, which is the compassion ministry arm. It's a collaboration between the North American Mission Board and the International Mission Board. So between NAM and IMB comes Send Relief. I work on a project specifically called the Serve Tour. Right now I'm in our headquarters, our NAM headquarters in right outside of Atlanta, Georgia. So I get to be here, get to be with the team. We've got some of our international team is here. Our full national team is here, besides all of our ministry center directors. So for those who aren't familiar with Send Relief, like I said, we are the compassion ministry guys. So we have ministry centers all across North America that kind of are doing ongoing compassion ministry in ways that are contextualized and needed in their particular regions. So we've got some in Puerto Rico, we've got ministry center in Los Angeles, in Boston, and obviously no 2 look the same because the needs of these communities don't look the same. I work on a project called Serve Tour, like I said, which is about 4.5 years old now. We've done 22 domestic serve tours and I believe 6 international serve tours. I have been on 20 of the 22 domestic serve tours. And so basically what we do is the goal is for the weekend to be a catalytic missions kind of blitz, for lack of a better term. And so what we aim to do is to engage high numbers of volunteers in a community to serve across various projects that have been determined by local churches, cities and states that have been identified by local leadership with the hope of meeting tangible needs while getting to share the hope and truth of the gospel in the process. And so my team helps organize those, execute those, mobilize folks, and just kind of plan all the logistics and details behind that to make sure that they happen.
Yeah, that's great. What are some examples of things that will happen on a serve tour?
Can be a little bit of anything. So we typically have a certain percentage of projects that are more construction based. And so the hope of these are to, like I say, meet tangible needs. So we might build a wheelchair ramp for a church member who can't get it out of their house anymore. We might, like in some cities, we have repaired locks and windows on a community member's home with the hope of sharing the gospel with the homeowner and inviting her back to the local church. We'll do block parties to kind of engage the community. We'll do paint projects. We'll do school projects. So we'll do anything from, painting schools to building greenhouses at schools to creating sensory areas for students with different needs. So we always say no 2 cities look alike because obviously they don't look alike. So their serve tours shouldn't look alike. And so locals submit projects, have identified projects based on greatest need in their area. And then we just help rally around them and support them. We always say we serve the city with the city. And so we're very clear that if we leave a city and all you remember is that Send Relief is there, then we have failed and we have not done our job well. But if you can walk away from a serve tour and you can say, Resurrection Church served me by XYZ, then we'll consider that a success. If it points to a local church and it ultimately points to Christ, then we'll consider it a success.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. How do you think about the relationship between Send Relief and the local church, whether at a meta level or maybe on a particular serve tour week?
Everything we do is through the local church. So we think that the local church is in their community for a reason, and we don't want to do something that is God's call for the local church to do. And so our goal is to just help equip the local church to do things they maybe haven't been doing, or to help them kind of extend their reach in some ways, or say, like, especially for Serve Tour, they say, hey, there are things that we have wanted to do, but we haven't been able to for financial reasons, for lack of manpower, for lack of vision, lack of strategy. That's when we get to come in and we can say, hey, you guys are the experts on your communities, but here we can help you think through some strategy. We can help provide some resources. We can kind of help put up some guardrails to help you think about how can I actually meet these needs and how can I actually engage my community in a way that is long lasting and a way that is contextually appropriate. And so we serve local churches and we don't replace local churches. We don't ever intend to. We just want to just help empower and equip the local church to do what they are doing in their communities.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Do you have any examples of churches maybe that have been impacted positively by that? You use that word catalytic, those sort of catalytic efforts of Send Relief. And so if you say we're going to try to help, we're going to assume, at least at a basic level, you have this desire. Maybe that's assuming too much in some cases, but let's just assume you have that basic desire to love your neighbors and to serve them in tangible ways. Or do you have like an example, maybe a specific or general example of church or churches who you saw that, they saw that catalytic impact? Like this was a thing that got them started and got the ball rolling down the hill, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. I think in every city, we see examples of churches who have participated in Serve Tour either because we've come to their city or because they have come to a city where we're hosting a Serve Tour and it's like close to them. There have been several churches, especially within like 2022, 2023, those first few years post-pandemic, where churches had said, we have not turned our eyes outward to our communities. We have not mobilized our people. We have been dormant for a while. And this was kind of our first step back into serving strategically and serving well. We really try to, especially with a Serve Tour, like it's just 2 days maximum or 1 day. So the ask is not big. And so we have found it's a really good kind of like either entry or re-entry back into compassion ministry, where folks have said, like, before this, we weren't doing anything. I could get them to come to Dayton, Ohio for one Saturday. And that kind of got them re-engaged. It kind of whetted their appetites for serving again. It reminded them of why we do it, how we can do it, and it got us re-engaged back into mission. We've seen some churches who have come from other cities that will come serve in a Serve Tour city, and they will say, hey, I loved this ministry so much. I either one, want to go home and replicate this where I have come from, which is best case scenario, or two, they say, hey, I love this church planner's heart. I love his church. I love what he's doing. Can our church, who is 2 states away, can we serve you by coming once every 6 months or, once every 3 months to do things like this that, you might need help with? And so we kind of see partnerships form between different local churches, which is also best case scenario. So we've seen it truly time and time again in every city we've been to.
Yeah, that's good. And that, I don't know if you've read any of my things or watched any of my podcasts.
All of them.
Good. I think even like our intro line to the podcast, like the whole truth with the whole church for the whole world, relates to what you're saying there, that there's a sense in which when we serve together, the sense of Catholicity motivates us to serve together. And there might be, let's just like, again, Send Relief is a Southern Baptist. It's a partnership between IMB and NAM. So let's assume that Southern Baptist churches can cooperate. That's a massive assumption sometimes.
Mhm.
But let's assume that Southern Baptist churches can cooperate. That means we're going to be aligned, more aligned on doctrinal issues than others. So at the very least, I think we can cooperate on compassion ministries much more broadly than at the denominational level. If you might disagree with me, then at least grant that we can, that a sense of Catholicity would compel us to move in tandem with our fellow denominational churches to do good things. And so that partnership is compelled, I think, by a sense of Catholicity, by a robust theology of the church's connectedness. And then when we have that robust theology of the church's connectedness, we then move out on mission into the world. So I do think that mercy ministry demonstrates in this way the unity of the church, which is connected to the mission of the church, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways we've seen it become like the great equalizer. Like churches that otherwise have nothing in common, unfortunately, will serve arm in arm on some projects because we all can agree that Jesus has called us to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And so they will plant those flowers in a local park alongside their brothers and sisters in Christ and see the unity in that in a way that they maybe wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, I talk about this in like church pastorally, but I think it's even more true across churches. When you're like gazing at each other, you're going to see things you don't like. That's inevitable because we're sinners. When we're like fixing our focus on another person, you will find something that annoys you. And here's the reality. They will find something about you that annoys them. Now, me, I mean, that's hypothetical for me. I can't think of anything that would annoy somebody about
How
me.
long is this?
But no, we're almost done. I can't think, but I'm joking. Okay. I would say like aggregators don't take this, but aggregators don't listen to the Retrieving Catholicity podcast. And if you'll notice, I've taken a few sips of my Celsius, and I hate when podcasts with a listenership of less than 5,000 say no free ads. It's like, they don't care. They don't care. They're not going to pay you to talk about your product. Maybe eventually. Anyways, okay, if you are looking for something not to like about somebody, you're going to find it. That's especially true with other churches when, they don't do the service the same way. They articulate their ministry philosophy a different way. They have different preaching styles. They have, whatever. Like, there are things that will frustrate us about other churches. But when you are serving side by side with another church, your focus is less on the distinctions between each other and more on how are we sort of shoulder to shoulder serving other people. And I think that's when churches, especially Baptists, that's when the Southern Baptist Convention, at least, is at our best, is when we are aware of distinctions and differences that maybe compel us to be in different churches, right? But we're shoulder to shoulder for the gospel, standing side by side, arm in arm, doing work together instead of just lobbing grenades at each other of how we do things differently. And some of the best ways that we can learn to love other churches, which is something I think Catholicity compels us to do. We should love other churches. One of the best ways we can learn to do that is just by serving alongside of other churches, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think anything that also gets our gaze off ourselves and upward, most people we come across don't have the luxury of arguing over stylistic things when they don't know.
Even have a category for it.
They don't even know to say that or ask that or have a preference on something. Because they are too busy serving in their communities and making sure that their people are cared for and engaging the lost in their cities. And I think whenever we take that posture of looking upward, getting our eyes off of us and our differences and onto what Christ has modeled for us, then we can appreciate our brothers and sisters in Christ and see them as, hey, we're all on the same team instead of enemies.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the work that God calls us to becomes something that points our eyes to God together and allows us to cooperate in a theocentric way, right? Our focus is on who God is and what he's called us to do, which is another thing I think is worth mentioning here. So I believe Send Relief, helping hurting people, serving hurting people in Jesus' name. What role would you say gospel centrality plays in your work, and how does the gospel itself, which is the verbal sharing of the news, right? Everyone loves to rag on that quote that gets attributed to St. Francis of Assisi, preach the gospel and when necessary use words. And it's bad. I mean, it's bad. It comes from somewhere though. And the heart behind it, I think, is like, when you take off your critical glasses for a moment, the idea is like your life should match your message. And that's a very biblical idea. The problem is maybe it undersells the significance of the gospel as a spoken proclamation.
Right.
The gospel is a piece of news. And so if you were to say, share the news and use words if necessary, you're kind of like, doing some sign language things. I don't know. Sign language, but I didn't mean to offend anyone who uses. My wife's a speech therapist, so she's going to be like, "Wow, yeah, okay." You have to use the words to share the news, assuming
Right.
an auditory learner. And so, where would you say gospel centrality, the spoken message of the gospel, plays? Maybe in the Serve Tour, in St. Relief's thinking more broadly, and then just
Mhm.
even more basically in the life of a church as a church. Let's say most people watch this are probably pastors, church leaders, or involved church members. And so, what
Mhm.
role does the spoken gospel, I guess, play in compassion ministry?
It for Send Relief and for Serve Tours, it is central and crucial. But yes, it is. It is central and it is crucial, and it is the whole reason. Like that is why that's what sets Send Relief apart from a humanitarian organization. So, like anybody can teach you, anybody with training can teach you how to use a chainsaw and how to dig a well for those who need it. Like anyone can meet tangible needs, but only the compassion ministry from the Christian perspective can meet the whole need of the whole person. And so we operate with gospel focus and gospel centrality. Like that is why we do what we do. Our goal is that through acts of compassion ministry, we can remove some barriers that would prevent someone from wanting to hear what we have to say and receive this life-saving gospel message. And so oftentimes we have seen in our work that people who have been antagonistic to the gospel, they have been put off by the gospel, are of the Christian more so than anything, are
Yeah.
far more open to hearing about the good news once they see we care about them as a person. Like we
Yeah.
care that you have
Yeah.
somewhere to sleep tonight. We care that you have food to eat today.
Mhm.
We take when Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, literally, we don't say,
Mhm.
who is my neighbor? I think like that's kind of like our heart for everything. With the addendum, we still will love you and care for you and serve you, even if it's a no. Like, even
Yeah.
if you're like, I don't want to hear that message,
Yeah.
got it. Got it. I am compelled to serve you and love you because the Lord compels me to, not because I want to bait and switch you to
Yeah.
receive this gospel message. And so that's kind of how we operate. We want to care for the whole person. And I think
Yeah.
that's like central to the Christian and to the
Yeah.
church is like it strengthens the outward argument that we have of what we believe when we
Yeah.
show that
Yeah.
we care about our neighbors like we care about
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah.
And so like there's like you can look all through scripture, like the early church in Acts when, they say they sold everything that they had, laid the money
Mhm.
at the apostles' feet so they could distribute it, and then no one
Mhm.
had any need among them. I just think like that is like what we long to see is like
Yeah.
put me
Yeah.
out of a job, please, because there are no more needs to meet. There are no more like people have all said yes. We know that's not gonna
Yeah.
happen, but it's just like what an ideal to like aspire to.
Yeah, that's good. I think, when we think about the relationship between the church and the mission of God, ecclesiology and missiology, I think there has been a reaction to over-pragmatized
Mhm.
service, and I also think there's been a reaction to people who are overly concerned about being winsome. And I think early in my ministry, I did think I could almost impress people into, "Oh, we're the church that serves people, therefore you should believe the gospel." And theologically, that's obviously not how things work, and I think
Mhm.
that that's a good thing to realize, that you can't impress somebody into believing the gospel, that our works
Mhm.
aren't going to do that in any way. But I think you can run with that logic past the Bible. And so what I mean is the
Mhm.
Bible clearly teaches that they may see your good works and glorify your God in heaven, that there is a relationship between our works and our gospel witness.
Mhm.
In the same way that there's a relationship between saving faith and our works, right? That our works might not earn us saving faith. Well, they don't
Mhm.
earn us saving faith, but
Mhm.
our works are a good and necessary consequence of saving faith. And so I think that evangelistically that works the same way, that yes, we can't impress people or ever be winsome enough for people to come in.
Mhm.
But the bottom line is, whether they come in or not, we are called to live out the Christian ethic. And that Christian ethic becomes the aroma, as Paul would say, of life, or the aroma, a pleasing aroma to those who are coming to life, that God's calling to
Mhm.
himself. And to those who hate it, they will still hate it, right? They'll still
Right.
say, F you and get out of here. And what do you want from me? And
Right.
the church is this, the church is that. And so I think it's really helpful that you comment that, we're not so much commanded to control that outcome. It's like, listen, I don't have the choice to choose between loving you and serving you and not loving you and serving you at a very fundamental
Right.
level. That whether or not you believe the gospel does not stop me from A, loving you, and B, sharing that news with you, you know?
Right.
And so I think
Right.
I think that's helpful to note that gospel centrality is not a bait and switch thing. We sincerely believe our deepest problem is that we are marred by sin. And we
Mhm.
sincerely believe that the only solution to that is the Lord Jesus Christ. And we
Mhm.
sincerely believe that your physical needs are valid. And we sincerely believe that God has created you and loved you, even though you've rebelled against him and turned from him. And so we
Right.
want to meet all of those needs and love the whole
Right.
person. And that's something that wasn't complicated for most of church history, but
Right.
is now complicated by people who like to fight online.
Yeah, I think especially when people learn that if you work in compassion ministry, like vocationally, they love a gotcha. I think people love to say like, well, if someone's hungry, would you give them a sandwich or the gospel? And I'm like, when have you ever had to choose? Like this is
Yeah.
2026. You don't have to choose that. And you
Yeah.
can do both. Like believe it or not, never have you had to pick one or the other. You can
Yes.
meet a physical need and a spiritual need. You're allowed there. I said it. You're allowed to do both.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and we can start winding to a close here. I think that I would personally articulate the church's mission in a more narrow sense than I did 4 or 5 years ago. So I think the mission of the church is to proclaim the gospel and make disciples of all nations. And so I think the ministries of the church are aimed at growing believers into maturity. I think that
Mhm.
the missing word in Christian community is maturity, that we are called to grow up together into Christ. But here's the kicker. I think that by being for the church in this way, the church's gathering shapes the church to be for the world. So the church's ministry, I think, might be frustratingly narrow at times for some people, at least in my mind, to make disciples and to proclaim the gospel. But the Christian's ministry is very broad,
Mhm.
and Christians should do good works together. And the
Mhm.
church can catalyze and sponsor and own those good works. And so I think that that is something that when we'll be sympathetic to the argument that, you care about this because you're a woke lib or something like that. I think that there are institutions and denominations and movements that have left the gospel completely because the end was always helping other people instead of
Mhm.
glorifying God. And the
Right.
irony there is that if the end is not glorifying God, you can't actually help other people in a lasting way. So we have to be almost obnoxious in our way of saying, listen, our goal is glorifying God because that's the whole purpose of everything. So the church, when we gather, the gathering of the church is for the believer, and
Mhm.
that was like a paradigm shift for us and our church's life, and you were a part of those days at Resurrection. But by being for the believer, we are for the world because we're
Mhm.
that gathering is shaping us into people who God sends out into the world and loves people and serves people and shares the gospel with people in our lives. And so I think that we can both say the church has a somewhat narrow mission, a gospel focused mission, but
Mhm.
the Christians have a broad mission to share the gospel, yes, but to share that, like even Paul will talk about, like, when I lived among you, I shared my whole life with you.
Mhm.
You saw my conduct, you saw my aim in life, you saw my goals, you saw all these sorts of things. And so I'm thankful for ministries like Send Relief who help the church say, listen, we are coming alongside of churches who are all about the gospel.
Mhm.
And we're helping you say, because we're all about the gospel, how can we demonstrate that in the world? How can we love and
Mhm.
serve other people? So
Mhm.
maybe it's sort of one of our last questions. Maybe the last question, we'll see how it goes. How would you help a church? Let's say a serve tour is not coming your way. So let's
Mhm.
take that off the table.
Mhm.
How would you help a church say, okay, how can you begin to help Christians live out their love for neighbor individually and then maybe corporately? What are some things that you can start doing as a church to better engage your community? So that I want to learn from here at Resurrection, of course, and then I think might be helpful for our listeners and viewers.
Yeah. So we have a lot of formal ways to do that. I think what I love most about this work is that it demystifies things and it takes things out of like the clouds and puts them on the ground. And so
Yeah.
instead of just saying, love your neighbor as yourself, period, full stop, figure out what to do with that, we say, here are some ways you can do that. So of course we have plenty of resources, downloadable resources all over our website. I
Yeah.
think the biggest thing that we do is say there's a church that is not near a ministry center. You can't come see it. We're not coming on a serve tour. You're doing it yourself. We have
Yeah.
different pathways that churches can kind of figure out where they are. So we kind of group them in our mind, and we provide training, coaching, that type of thing. But basically, here's the long and short of it. We would say, where are you in your process? Are you like, we have a robust goal. We know what we're going for. Like we've identified, this is a need in our community that we've already identified. We need some strategy for how to meet it. We
Mhm.
would talk through those things. If you say, we love the Lord and we have folks who want to serve in a tangible way in their community. We have no idea what that means. That's obviously a different conversation. And so we would say, let's do a community needs assessment. Let's see what are the needs in your community, not that you've seen our needs just in general. What are ongoing things that are happening? What are ways people are already being served? Can you just support that effort? Like, if you guys align in enough ways, can I just support what is already happening instead of reinventing the wheel and saying, no, come to mine instead, come do mine instead? Like, how can you join in the work that's already happening in your city and show that the church cares about it, that the Christians in your neighborhood care about this as well? So we have different kind of pathways that we would put folks on. And we provide one-on-one training, coaching, all of that in a very specific, like as a specific from Sin Relief to a church, with the whole goal being, how do we equip you for longevity in compassion ministry, for replication? We don't want you just to throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Like, we want you to not adopt every single type of ministry that sounds like a good idea. What makes sense for your congregation, for your people, for the needs of your community, and then how do we get there? How do we do that?
Yeah.
And so those are kind of the things that we would kind of coach folks through.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I think, speaking as a pastor too, this is something I'm looking to do. Like, how can we be more involved, more engaged? Because I think there are seasons, like I've learned in pastoral ministry, you can't do everything at once. So there are seasons you have to be more internal and seasons you have to be more external. Some people would disagree with that, and I understand why. I probably would have before I was a pastor. But there's a season to sort of, what do we need to address internally? How can our energies be focused that way? But if you're only doing that, you're not doing what God's called you to do. So then there are seasons where you organize internally. You're never going to be perfect, but you can get to a point of health where you stop focusing internally and then your focus goes out. And so I just want to encourage pastors. I think that we often let the perfect be the enemy of good. So maybe start with just asking some people in your church, what are some needs that you think are in our community that we could begin to meet? Like, what's one need? And maybe you can have conversations and just do one thing one time and let that lead to a second thing a second time. And so I think it's so important that we start where we are with what we have. And I appreciate efforts like Sin Relief that are catalytic to help churches think about taking your next step in mercy ministry, compassion ministry, in serving people in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. So thanks for joining us, Molly. I hope that
Oh my gosh.
it was a lunch break well spent.
Yeah, it was. What an honor. I can't wait to check out your podcast.
Okay.
This is going to be...
All right. Like, subscribe, rate, review. YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify.
Spotify.
Review, rate. Where's your podcast that people can...
Sorry, I think I lost connection.
All right. Let's kill this.
That hasn't happened.
Thanks for watching. Goodbye. I'll call you later with Rosalie.